We've not long returned from our 10-day Tassie holiday. Along for the ride were my trusty K3 and the Pentax 12-24mm f4 lens. I was going to take both the Pentax 12-24 and Pentax 20-40mm lens, but as we were travelling light and choosing not to check in luggage, I was hamstrung by a 7 kg total weight limit for all carry-on luggage. So I had to leave behind my tripod, filters and the 20-40mm lens, and opt to shoot everything handheld. Although the 20-40mm is my go-to lens, I did really want to see what results I could achieve if forced to only use the 12-24mm range of focal lengths. Coming up, I'll show my favourite photos from the trip and give you a good look at how the lens performed and what you can expect from the APS-C Pentax 12-24mm focal lengths. I originally bought the 12-24mm lens primarily to shoot landscapes, but I'm wondering if it could also prove to be a good everyday walk-around lens. After all, it's effectively an 18-35mm full-frame equivalent lens, and full-frame 35mm is my favourite focal length. Looking back, although 35mm is my favourite, I think I ended up taking most of my photos at the wider 12mm end. Very interesting. I have to admit I was worried that I might be taking the wrong lens. I went back and forth over days, weeks, trying to decide which lens to take. As I said, my go-to lens is normally the 20-40mm Pentax limited lens. It's weather sealed, renders beautifully, and the combination of the 20-40 and K3 results in a nicely balanced camera which is comfortable to hold in the hand for a full day of shooting, and the quick action slip on-off lens cap ends up making a lot of sense in less than ideal wet weather conditions. Our trip to New Zealand the year before last saw days of rain, and I had no qualms wandering around shooting all day with the K3 and weather-sealed 20-40mm in hand. You can see the results of that trip in the link below. But after all is said and done, I decided to take the 12-24mm lens. I thought it would be good to spend 10 days forcing myself to shoot everything at this focal length. Who knows, I might actually prefer it. It was also a good opportunity to properly put the lens through its paces, see where it shines and where it's not so strong. I shot every day on our trip and ended up shooting everything from landscapes, portraits and low light gallery shots. First, let's discuss focal lengths. I took a couple of impromptu portraits of my wife on the beach, one at 12mm and the other at 24mm. Although I missed focus, I thought they'd still provide good examples to show what you can expect from the two focal length extremes of the 12-24. My wife was standing at about an arm's length from me, and as you can see, the 12mm focal length produces a full body shot if shot portrait, and the 24mm focal length captures her from the waist up. I always shoot everything manual focus and manual exposure, but these two missed focus photos make a strong case for setting my autofocus settings to face detect. That way I can still shoot manual focus for everything, but when it comes to shooting people, I could simply switch to autofocus and have everything ready to go for more secure, snappy portrait shots. I think I'm going to do that. The other thing you need to be aware of with the 12-24mm focal length is that unless you're shooting a landscape, you really need to get close to your subject. Take these shots of this echidna. I was literally hovering around 12 to 24 inches over him, and my closest shot might have been even closer. Happily, the echidna completely ignored me as he was busy hunting ants. He didn't stop moving for a second, and I had a hard time keeping up manually focusing. But I did get one or two I was happy with. Overall, I'm very happy with the 12-24's sharpness, colour and contrast. And I'm glad I owned this lens. It's not perfect. Shooting into the sun reveals chromatic aberration, but this is quickly dealt with in software. But what can't be rectified in software is some pretty aggressive lens flaring. I kept the lens hood on all the time, primarily to protect the front element when getting in close on subjects. But it proved to be no remedy for shots angled towards the sun. Even with the sun not in the shot, the lens can still be affected by unattractive flaring. Is this a deal breaker? Personally, not for me. I'll learn to work around it. But if your style of shooting calls for these types of shots, it could prove an issue. The other thing you need to be careful of is the lens cap. With the lens hood attached in the reverse position, the front element surround forms a sort of bowl shape, and it's really easy for the cap to slip when attaching, potentially marking the front element. I fit the front cap very carefully now because that's happened to me a couple of times. Okay, now let's see the photos. I've made this video 4K, so hopefully you can get a good idea of the rendering of this lens. I'll include location and exposure settings for each photo. I have three main lenses I use with my K3. The Pentax 50-135mm, the 20-40mm, and the 12-24mm. I also have a Pentax 50mm f1.4 prime and a couple of others, including a zoom I purchased way back in 1984 with my first Pentax film camera, which I still own. But my set of lenses for this camera will not be complete until I finally add the Pentax 300mm f4 and Pentax 77mm prime, which I will eventually hope to do once funds allow. Oh, and I might swap out the 12-24 for Pentax's new 11-18mm lens, but I'd need to see more test results from the 11-18 before making such a decision. If I can find an 11-18mm to rent, I'll try and do a comparison between the 12-24 and 11-18. I have heard the 11-18 lens is a little soft in the corners of the frame, but I want to test this for myself. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for your company, and until next time, bye for now.